Welcome to the place where we learn about and learn from the leaders in our field who are powering human creativity. I am Aaron Dworkin, and this is Arts Engines. Thanks again for joining me here on Arts Engines. Today's guest is Pierre van der Westhuizen, who serves as the director of the Gilmore Festival. Pierre, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Aaron. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's so great that you're able to be on the show. Obviously, we're so excited in terms of the Gilmore Festival being one of our creative partners. But also, I had the wonderful honor to be at the festival and to be able to present for some of the Gilmore Fellows this past year. Just an extraordinary, obviously, group of leaders and musicians. And it was just, of course, an extraordinary environment in which to be in, of talent and of innovation. So thank you for all of your leadership.
Oh, thank you. And thank you for, it was thrilling to have you as part of it. So thank you for that as well.
Absolutely. So to kind of dive right into things, we have, there's a number of presenters who are partners to the show. It's obviously a key part of just our field overall. And one of the things that we have been talking a fair amount on the show is just how are things changing? There's so many things that are changing because of the pandemic. There's things that are changing because of diversity issues that have happened over the past couple of years. There's kind of, I guess, a sense that our field is always evolving, but now that evolution seems to have been put on steroids in some ways.
Right.
Over the past couple of years. And so I'm curious from your perspective, and of course, as an extraordinary leader, not just, of course, at Gilmore, what's your sense of this kind of landscape, specifically for presenters, presenting organizations? Where do you see it? Where do you see it leading? What changes are you seeing?
Thank you for the question. It is really fascinating to see what is going on in just this past 3 years. And as you hinted at, I think we were already trending in certain directions, and certain major events like the pandemic and the events in the wake of George Floyd and all of these sort of seismic things really catapulted a lot of these elements forward. One big thing that is the role of technology, obviously. It's interesting, the NEA comes out with this arts participation study every few years. And in 2017, something struck me when they came out with that report that I think it was like 2/3 of audiences, or even more, closer to 70%, were consuming most of their arts online. Which was staggering for me, And now that was 2017. So you can imagine what probably happened during the pandemic and what that meant for audience participation and where we find them. So as presenters, we have to come to terms with that, this online presentation is going to be part of our DNA moving forward. There's no avoiding it, and actually embracing it can be so beneficial to any arts organization. So, working with your constituents, working with your board to help them realize and figure out in part of your programming, just not even just programming, but part of your organization, how that will look like. I think we tried to coexist with it before, and now it's more of a no, it's part of who we are. It's not just we're living with this online world,
And how are you finding that at Gilmore, right? Because there's those who are like, everything that we do, it must only take place in person. It can't be digital, right? And there's kind of that viewpoint among some. And then others are, we'll just take everything and make everything we do, in a digital landscape.
Yeah.
How are you navigating those waters at Gilmore? And how do you find, are you trying to strike a balance, or do you have any criteria that guide you in terms of how you lead those efforts?
I definitely try to strike a balance here at the Gilmore, but we always go with what is best for the artist. What will make maximum impact for the artist and in their impact on the community. And again, going from this NEA study and looking at the trends. But here at the Gilmore, we tried to, the pandemic naturally forced us to rethink, because definitely one thing that I said very clearly early on is we are not going dark during the pandemic. We will find a voice. There's no way that, I can't sit still. It's just not in my nature. And we'll go crazy. So we quickly figured out that we have a little theater here, Wellspring Theater, and basically had to retrain everybody into using that venue from a performance venue into essentially a television studio, and how do we turn that around? And so we brought artists to Kalamazoo to keep them busy, to keep them working, and we live streamed here from Kalamazoo pretty much everything. When it was physically impossible, like with borders closing, we live streamed from Berlin or from New York, or from another small location in Germany with Angela Hewitt. So and that really helped us grow so much and forge relationships and partnerships that we never thought possible. And we, made new friends and gained new audiences that we didn't see before from around the world. And then during the festival this year, typically in the past, we would live stream maybe a handful of concerts, and the live streaming was, what you were watching was kind of, you were seeing a live concert, and it wasn't really produced for TV, right, for the screen. So we really challenged ourselves this year to work within that live environment space to also make it a very rewarding experience for the artist, but also for those watching, and continue with, high quality live streaming in addition to having an audience there, which presented a whole new set of challenges, and working with robotic computers and, a team offsite, and but it was incredibly rewarding along with being challenging. So we wanted to figure this out to do both things.
Awesome. And I saw that firsthand in my presentation, that both it was the live engagement, but also the very active live stream as well, that was very clearly produced, highly produced. So it's a wonderful balance. To kind of switch gears just a little bit, I'm curious, and we have a wonderful international audience, and I think it's always great to kind of see, and especially for those in the States, to get a sense of the context of our audiences and all of that. And just kind of curious from your perspective, especially international perspective, of kind of musical appetites, and how are they in the US versus Europe, Asia? Do you see any kind of either clear differences, distinctions that are just would be informative for all of us as we think about the work that we do in the programming we do?
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's worth for artists to think about that when they're touring globally. By and large, the US musical appetite is pretty straightforward, at least here in the Midwest, where we are based and operate. And we have to think of the US in that way a bit, because East and West Coast have its own, tastes, and they might be different. But then the large portion of the Midwest is also very different. And it's not that people aren't willing to try something new, but I can definitely see a marked difference, for example, in our attendance numbers, when there is something that is completely straightforward contemporary music versus, your Beethoven programming and your Bach programming and Chopin. However, one exception to that was Yuja Wang's concert here that we had. She played Beethoven and Liszt, but then also Ligeti, which, funnily enough, we still think of that as new music, even though, it's stuff from the last century. But, which also speaks volumes to musical appetites here. But then she also played, some Philip Glass and Kapustin, and the audience went completely wild for it. And so I think they came for Yuja, and they came for the Beethoven and the Liszt, but they stayed for these other things, and found themselves absolutely loving it. So I find hope in that there's something exciting there in the delivery of that. And then, when going to Europe, I attended, for example, the Heidelberg Festival in Germany a couple of years ago. And they had a production of an early music opera, Castor and Pollux. And it was in this interesting space surrounded by screens and speakers everywhere. And the singers were walking through the audience the way that they had produced that. And then gradually, as we went along, the music changed. There was a DJ, and I didn't notice it until later on. The music started to change from this, early Baroque over into, highly manipulated sounds and new music and contemporary sounds. And this was fascinating to me, and it was very well attended, sold out every show. And the audiences, you could tell that they clearly support this and are very involved in this kind of programming, which is very exciting. And the other thing that they did, for example, they had a pool, indoor pool that was converted into a concert space, and just so using interesting spaces. And they, had an event at 10 p.m. at night with a DJ and a piano trio. So again, trying to mix different genres and forms, I find very compelling. And we're getting there as audiences are consuming more things online. They're also finding more things online. So I'm seeing in audience reactions that there is more openness, and I'm hearing more from people. Hey, have you tried this? Have you heard this? And people in this area, which that's exciting to me, that they're also discovering it by themselves.
Awesome. Well, that is great. And especially that introduction of innovation and of exploration. Truly wonderful. Unfortunately, we are just about out of time, but I always like to ask of all my guests, when you think about this work, and especially the breadth, right, of leadership at the Gilmore and all of that, there's got to be some challenging days or times when it seems like potentially some of these, obstacles might be insurmountable. As a leader, where do you look to for guidance, for strength, for advice when times are tough?
I do a lot of reading, and non-music related things. I try to read poetry and sometimes also just fiction that's totally completely escapist, like thrillers or anything like that would just take me away. Because sometimes when you disengage, that your subconscious has a way of working on the problem while you're not thinking about it, right? And so I think we've gotten away in general as a society from just taking a walk without any media in front of you, without any cell phone, without anything, and just have your mind wander. And and then something that you were wondering about a few weeks ago, all of a sudden an idea hits you that would address that question that you were thinking about. So I think that is very important. I have 4 young children, so also taking away all of the media and just spending time with them, learning from them, has been incredibly helpful too. And then I love to travel, so that has been tough, but now we're finally getting back into it, traveling other places, and just discovering, meeting new people, talking to other people. That is so helpful and so inspiring.
Pierre van der Westhuizen, you truly are one of the arts engines who is powering human creativity in our world. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you. It was my honor. Thank you, Aaron.